So for everyone on the call, this is Grant and Carlie. We're at ERP Connect Consulting. This is our Toolbox Tuesdays webinar. Today, we're going to be focusing on advanced user management and auto create dimensions for Business Central. So what we're going to talk about today, we hop into our agenda, is we are going to just do a quick run through of the current gaps in Business Central out of the box, the solutions that we provide to fill those gaps. Carlie's going to be doing a live demo in Business Central on advanced user management and auto create dimensions. We'll run through the next steps on how to get this into your test account, go through our resources, and at any point in time, if anyone has a question, please feel free to hop into the chat box. If you see something you like, click the react button and send us a reaction. Let's dive into the gaps, Carlie. All right, so first things first. What are the gaps in Business Central? Number one, right now in Business Central, there is no ability to restrict a user's visibility by master data filtering, and there's really no ability to take master data and to report. There we go. And to report on from the GL or keep it in sync with other dimension values. Now, on the flip side, there's no ability to report on subledger data as well, like customer, vendor, and item directly from the GL. And there's also no real easy way to export or aggregate data based on the subledger components from the GL postings. So what are our solutions to fill those four distinct gaps? Number one, giving the ability to restrict user access to just certain customers, vendors, posting groups, dimensions, and GL accounts, ability to block the user's visibility to things like AR, AP, and GL balances, being able to give more granular control over which dimension values a user can select and post to on new and existing transactions, ability to link master data records so that dimension values are created and updated to maintain data sync and integrity. And finally, just being able to report on customer, vendor, item data from the GL by creating a link to dimension value records. Those are kind of the big solutions, and that's really what Carlie's going to be touching on today in our live demo. So y'all know us by now on this end. We really like to dive into the system as quick as we can. Carlie, going to pass it off to you. If anyone has any questions, put it in the chat box. We'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you, Grant. Okay, we're going to get started with advanced user management. So kind of the core behind advanced user management is being able to restrict users' access to certain things throughout the system. Okay, so I'm going to hop just right in here, and everything you do is from the AUM setup page, advanced user management setup page here. You'll see that it's pretty simple right here. You just activate the extension, of course, put in your activation key, or if you're in the free trial, you'll generate your demo key. And then there's one more toggle here to activate the item journal restriction, and I'll mention what that is once we go through the user setup, okay? So typically I don't like to go to the user setup, but that's really where this is all done. And then I'll kind of show you how this impacts the rest of the system, okay? So here you'll go to user setup. This is where you're defining, okay, who am I setting up and assigning these restrictions to, okay? So we have kind of a quick little tool here to generate all users. Here, let me put one in here and I'll generate all users. Okay, so it'll just look at the user list and put all users in there for you, so you don't have to type one by one for the user restrictions, okay? You can do that, or you can just put in the user here and it'll do that drop-down list for you. Okay, across here in all these columns, this is everything we provide with our extension that you're able to filter on, okay? So the key thing here is whatever you put in these columns is what the user will be filtered to, okay? So if I want to filter the admin, which is myself, to a certain customer posting group, right? This is going to say, okay, the admin user can only see customers with the domestic customer posting group. Okay, so that's how it works for all of the columns, right? Same concept for salesperson code. If I only wanted the admin to see sales documents, customers, customer ledger entries with that CS salesperson code, that's the code I put in right here. Also, with all of these, you can use the normal out-of-the-box filtering tools. So if I wanted to do CS through, HR, I can put that here as well. More likely, maybe they have access to a couple, so you'll use the bar, and then you could do this as well. Okay, so all those out-of-box filtering tools that you use already, you can use in any of these columns across here. Okay. So I'm going to make a couple and kind of just show you here how that looks. You'll see that we have a ton of these filtering options, so I'm not going to go through one by one, but to point out kind of, some of the key ones here. One thing you can do is you can block the users from seeing AR, AP balances, which is nice. So on a customer or vendor, they'd be able to still see the customer record, still see the vendor record, but block the actual balance due here, so that you can use that key here. This section in here is all really related to customers and sales, right? So customer numbers, customer posting groups, salesperson, sales global 1 and 2 codes. So it'll filter sales documents, customers, and customer and ledger entry pages to a certain dimension code. Okay, so dimension 1 and 2. And then we have the same thing for the vendors groups, same concept. So vendor posting groups, blocking the AP balance, purchaser, and then global 1 and 2 for purchase documents. Okay. We have some related to general ledger, so you can filter to GL accounts. So that would be really nice if you want to filter maybe all your employees from seeing like your salaries, GL account, bonus, tax information, things like that, which is a common one I see a request. Instead of like for previous implementations, I believe we had to create like a security filter and then assign it to those users. And then that gets really messy in trying to manage permissions. So rather than doing that, you would just set up the filter right here against those salaries, payroll, GL accounts. Okay. And then just remember, for these filters, you're putting in everything they can see. Okay. So if you wanted to exclude the salaries, expense account, things like that, you would put in all other GL accounts besides that one here. Okay. These two here are filtering the GL, the global 1 and 2 codes. So if they're only able to see, certain values here, you can filter. It's only going to show them this production code for global dimension 1. Okay. These two here are just filtering their lookup, and then you just activate that by checking this here. So if you'll see that my global dimension 1 has 3 values, if they should only be able to see, 2 of them when they are dropping down to select a dimension, this is what that's for. So it's filtering the lookup for dimension 1 and 2 right here. Okay. Then lastly, we have a section on inventory right here. And so that is what, if you remember, I'll go back to the previous screen, activate item journal restriction. So if you plan to use a couple of these fields that I'll point out, you have to activate the item journal restriction right here. So if I go back to the user setup and scroll over, you'll see block item cost. So you can block the item cost, block GL balance. Okay, those are 2 more. But then the inventory journal that I just mentioned is right here. Okay, so 1, you can block if someone should be allowed to post inventory journals or not. So if you'll see here, they can post item or physical inventory journals, negative or positive adjustments. So if they can, you turn this on here. Okay. And then you can also assign them a limit. So if they can only make, maybe an item adjustment over 10K, you would put in 10K right here. Okay. Or under 10K. Okay. So again, if you plan to use these last 2 features here, you just make sure to check on that Boolean field here on the setup page. Okay. So I'm going to create a couple filters here to show you how this works. So I'm going to come in, and for my user, I'm going to say salesperson code CS. And before I do that, I just want to show what the customer page currently looks like, right? So if I come back here, I have no filters on my customers right now. I'm going to open this list. You'll see all customers here, okay? And you'll see all salesperson codes. It's not filtered either, right? So now if I go back to AUM setup and I go to user setup, I'm going to filter my list. This is my user to this salesperson code right here. Okay, and if we look at it, it's going to filter the customer list, sales documents, and customer ledger entries. Okay, so I'm filtering to CS and I'm going to hit close. Key piece here is you do need to refresh your browser. Okay, so if I go to the customer list right now, I'm not going to see these changes. You do have to refresh your browser in order to see these changes. Okay, so I'm going to refresh. And that's just a one-time thing that you have to do once you set up those, okay? I'm going to go to my customer list now, okay? I only see 2 customers, and both of them have that CS salesperson code, okay? If I go to my sales orders, I only see sales orders with a salesperson code of CS. Okay, so again, that's a universal filter now that I have on the sales side: customers, sales orders, customer ledger entries. Okay, I'm going to go back to AUM setup here. Okay, and you can build on this, right? So if I wanted to now create some filters on the vendor side, right? I still have my salesperson code filter on the sales side, but now I want to create a filter on the vendor side. I'm going to filter this person from only seeing vendors 10,000 through 50,000, okay? Hit close. Again, I could keep building here. I'll make another one right here. We'll just do a small filter on here. Okay, to show that. Okay, so I created a vendor filter and a GL account filter here. Gonna hit close. Again, I do have to refresh since I'm updating that page. Okay, if I go to my vendors now, right, I only see the vendors 10,000 through 50,000. And again, that is kind of used now universally throughout that purchasing side. And if I go to my chart of accounts, I should only see those 3 accounts that I filtered to. Okay, so again, this is just a great way to create those filters throughout the system that otherwise can be hard to manage through permissions. Could it be done through permissions? Yeah, some of it maybe, but then that gets pretty messy to manage once you're adding new users. You add a new GL account, okay, I have to go back and update my security filter. Doing it through this advanced user management page is much more visible for the person updating it and just easier to manage as you onboard new users too. Okay. That is really the rundown of advanced user management. Do we have any questions before I move on to auto create dimensions?
Nothing in the chat box, Carlie, but for everyone, if you want to hop in the next couple of seconds, we'll post the app source link where you can actually get a free trial of advanced user management as well. Back to you, Carlie.
Okay, thank you. I am going to go back and just remove those filters. So I don't have any of those filters as we go through auto create dimensions, just so we can have a full customer list there. Okay, I'm going to refresh. Okay, so I'm going to go to the ACD setup page here, auto create dimension setup. Okay, so the whole idea around auto create dimensions is pretty much in the name of the extension, right, is to have the ability to automatically create these dimensions as I'm creating new records in the system. Okay, so that second part is key. So for example, we all know that you can create default dimensions on master data, on GL data, or on GL accounts, on customers, vendors, items, etc. Right? You can do it on documents as well, going to default dimensions. Okay, and you can set them up on GL accounts as well. All of that requires somebody to set up the default dimension though, right? So this is where this comes into place. A lot of times we see requests to be able to see more master level data on the GL. Okay, so show me on the GL. I want my GL broken out by customer. I want my GL broken out by items, vendors, posting groups, state. Maybe state for customers is one that I've gotten in the past quite a bit of request for tax reporting purposes. So I want my GL to have state in there as well. Okay, so what we're doing here is as I'm creating these new records in the system, it's auto adding the default dimension for me. Okay, so let's create one together, and it'll kind of make some more sense as we do this. So real quick, on the auto create dimension setup page, you'll activate the extension here, okay? I have a couple options here that I'll explain after we go through an example as well, okay? So if we come down here, you'll see that I have multiple sections, right? Kind of for each master data set in the system. So I have a customer section, I have an item section, resource vendor, salesperson, and employees. Okay, so for right now, I'm going to look at the items and vendors to go through this example. So we'll start with vendors. Okay, so you'll see for vendors, I have an option for vendor number. And then if I drop down on this, you'll see I'm supposed to link it to a dimension. Okay, you can do global dimension 1 or 2 or shortcut 3 through 8. Okay, so you can use any of the 8. It does not matter which. Okay, you'll see that same drop down for each of these. Okay, so like item category, if you would want this to be a default dimension, which one is it? Okay, I'm going to turn that back off. Okay, so what we do here is I'm going to say I want to set up, so whenever I create a vendor, essentially, it's going to put the vendor number automatically as a default dimension on that vendor record. So then anytime I create a purchase order, a purchase invoice, anything for this vendor, and I post it to the GL, that default dimension will automatically be tagged. The vendor number will be tagged and go to the GL. Then I can do some reporting on vendor number through my GL. Okay, that same concept exists for all of these right here. Okay, so you can see for customers, I have a lot of options, right? I have customer number I can do this for, customer posting group, general business posting group, customer state, customer country region code. Okay, and again, for items, I have a lot of options here: item category, general product posting groups, item vendor, location, item number. Okay, and then the list kind of goes on. I'm going to do vendors here first, and I'll kind of show you how this works. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my dimensions. Okay. And I'm going to create a new dimension here for vendors. Okay. And it doesn't matter what you name it. Okay. And so if you wanted to name it vendors or vendor number, that's fine. Okay. So I'm going to create a dimension here. I'm then going to go to my general ledger setup, where I assign global and shortcut dimensions and assign vendors to shortcut 5. Okay. So I'm going to come here and assign shortcut 5 to vendors. Okay. I'm then going to go back. It'll refresh since I updated a dimension, which is just normal out-of-box functionality. I'm going to go back to my ACD setup page and link vendor number to shortcut 5, because that's what I just did on the setup page, right? General ledger setup page. I'm now going to go to vendor number value posting. So this is saying when it creates that auto default dimension, what do I want that code to be here? So I'm going to put same code for now. Okay. Now I'm going to go to a vendor, create a new vendor here. ACD testing. And now when I go to the default dimensions, right, it's automatically added. Okay, vendor number is added because I had that set up. Okay, so the same exact concept exists for all of those other setup options on the setup page. So if I go back now to the ACD setup page, right, what we just walked through, the same kind of event would happen for each of these right here. A couple of features we added that is nice. So this recalc dimension, so since I just set up that vendor default dimension now, right, all of these vendors don't have that, the ones I previously created before I did this. So what you can do is run the recalc dimensions here, and it'll go through and update any of those default dimensions that I set up, or all the records that I had before I set up that default dimension, okay? And it'll update those records to have that as well, okay? 2 more options you have here is lock default dimension. So this is going to lock the default dimension page from being edited. So right now I have this turned off. So if I went into this vendor and went to that default dimension, I could update this page. So that would prevent me from doing so if I turn that on. Okay, the other option we have is lock the document. So since I set up this default dimension on the vendor and then I created a purchase order for this vendor, right, that default dimension would carry to that purchase order, just like normal out-of-box functionality. This lock would say, okay, we're going to lock the document from being edited here. Okay, so you don't have to use these here. They're just options to kind of keep that data integrity throughout the system. Okay, this last option here is an activate debug message. So this is just as it's creating default dimensions throughout the system. Like if I were to create a new vendor, it would say when I create the vendor, default dimension added. So it's kind of like a confirmation message for you that you can turn on if you would like. Okay. One other thing I like to note is that you can link 2 of these to the same dimension, right? So we only have 8, we all know that, right? So if I wanted to create a dimension, maybe called customer/vendor numbers, right? And then on the GL, I know that that could contain customer and vendor numbers. I can create a dimension called customer/vendor number, link both of those to shortcut dimension 4, for example. So I would put customer number, shortcut dimension 4, and then come down here and link this vendor number to also shortcut dimension 4. Okay, so that allows us to kind of limit the number of dimensions we're using, and we kind of know they're being used for this similar thing, right?
Hey,
Okay.
Carlie.
Yeah.
We did have 2 questions come in. I'm hoping
Okay.
you might be able to look at the chat box. These ones are definitely very detailed and might require a longer form response.
Okay. Does location code on item refer to a stock keeping unit's location code or different field on the item card? Correct. The stock keeping unit's location code. If a master record was assigned, will it? If record was assigned an incorrect default dimension and run. Okay, I should read these out loud so everyone knows what I'm answering. Okay, so if a master record was assigned an incorrect default dimension and you run the recalc dimension function, will it update override that dimension on the master record that the wrong dimension assigned? Or does it only update master records that do not have the default dimension assigned? That's a great question. And honestly, I want to run that to give you a 100% correct answer. I am thinking that it's going just to, it would update, override it. But I want to double check on that for you. So I can run that and let you know, Jet. So that's a good question. Okay. Those were the 2, right, Grant? No more
Correct.
questions?
You're good to go, Carlie. And
Okay.
I took note of that one too. I'll pass it along to you after.
Perfect. Yep. Great question. Okay. One other thing just to show here, of course, so as I'm creating these throughout the system, they are going to carry when I create new documents, right? So now if we created this vendor together, it auto added my default dimension here. We saw those 2 options on the setup page where I can lock this page down or leave it open. So right now it is left open, meaning I could update it if I would like. But now if I create a purchase invoice for this vendor, right, the kind of ease of it all is that I now have that on, oops, let me add this here first. Invoice dimensions, I have that on my documents as well, right? So it carries forward to my documents as well. And now we'll just post something together here and see that kind of flow through all the way to the GL for that reporting that we like to see, right? So I'll just enter a purchase invoice here. Post. Okay. So now if I go find entries on the posted document here, I'm just going to open up the GL, scroll over, right, and I see that vendor code on my GL without having to do anything, right? So that's the key. We all know we can set up default dimensions ourselves, but all I have to do was to create that vendor, right? As soon as I created that vendor, the default dimension was automatically added. I then create any, invoices, orders for that vendor, post them. It flows. This dimension now flows to the GL for me without me having to actually enter it myself. Okay. That is auto create dimension. Do we have any other questions?
At the moment, doesn't look like it, Carlie. So
Okay.
any other use cases you've seen with past clients or areas that you've seen where auto create really shines or advanced user management before we dive into the next steps?
Yeah. For auto create dimension, a request I've got a lot is the customer vendor being on your GL, of course. So that one's nice, right? Like I said, I think it'd be a good idea to create one dimension, customer/vendor number. That way you're not using up two global dimensions there, and link those. And then that gets you on your GL. And you can run kind of customer vendor reports from your GL, which is big, rather than going through the customer and vendor ledger entries. The other one that's nice, that's kind of specific though, would be the customer state as well. So again, like I mentioned before, I've seen that a lot for tax purposes, wanting to put that on the GL, or just kind of ease of reporting, be able to run some reports from the GL. So that one's big. And then advanced user management, I can't say enough good things about that one. Just being able to filter, like I mentioned before, the use case would be filtering users from seeing like those salary bonus GL accounts that they shouldn't have access to, payroll accounts. That's a big one that kind of this is giving you easy access to do so, as well as blocking maybe like an AR balance from internal employees or vendor balance. So that leads me into one other example I'll mention. A lot of times our employees are set up as vendors in the system, right? So maybe that way we can pay them, pay expenses to them. So a lot of times we don't want our employees, if they have access to Business Central, to be able to see other employees. And so oftentimes what I've seen is if that is the case, vendors are set up as employee, like with employee as the vendor posting group, right? So if we have two posting groups, one maybe is operational vendors, the other is employee posting groups, right? We could filter, our employees to only see operational vendors and not actual employees if they're set up that way. Okay, so that would be a couple more examples.
No, that's great stuff, Carlie. And we did actually get two more questions coming in. So number one, can the lock default dimensions be user specific, or is it all or nothing?
Right now, that is all or nothing. So it is on the overall setup page, not a user page.
Beautiful. And if you assign a shortcut dimension to customer posting group and use code mandatory, does it still create the default dimension for the customer, or does it just set the dimension as required, but with a blank default dimension?
Nope. So the first, it does still create the default dimension. It just puts the code mandatory, so it won't be blank. It'll create it as normal, kind of like we did just with code mandatory instead of same code.
That's beautiful. So yeah, I mean, these are all great. Anyone else who has any more questions while we dive back into the PowerPoint, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll be happy to answer them. But yeah, Carlie, if you want to jump back in for us, we're going to dive into the next steps and then quickly go through the resources. So what we got for you next, everyone, is like we said, if you just go to AppSource, I already put the link for advanced user management, and we can also put in auto create dimensions as well. Download a 30-day free trial. If you're a Microsoft partner, get that into your demo environment, test it out with a client where you think it might be a good use case, and connect with us if you have any questions on it. If you're a user, put this in your sandbox environment. With Business Central, you definitely get a few that you can play around with. Get advanced user management or auto create dimensions in there. Try it out for 30 days. We have comprehensive user setup guides as well that should be able to answer a lot of your basic questions, along with video walkthroughs like what we're doing on Toolbox Tuesday today. And then, of course, really simple with the free trial. If you just watch our activation video, it's 90 seconds, shows you exactly how to set up and generate the demo for both of these extensions. So finally, the resources. We have a ton on our product page and app source, including summaries, screenshots, and those setup guides for every single one of our 28 extensions. If you go to our YouTube channel, we have step-by-step video walkthroughs of pretty much all of our extensions. We have a few newer ones. We're still working on getting those videos up for. And we will post the Toolbox Tuesday recording as well as send it to you by email after this presentation. Now, in terms of the product guide, that will give you a fit gap analysis for every single one of our extensions. So kind of similar to what we did today, show you the gaps in BC out of the box, show you the solutions, show you the use cases. And of course, too, it'll give you an idea of the amount of time it takes to configure. I mean, Carlie, what would you say the baseline is for advanced user management and auto create? Maybe an hour tops to configure, maybe two?
Yep, an hour tops, definitely for both. These ones are straightforward. You know, as advanced user management is maybe more of a, you know, ongoing thing. As you onboard new users, you would come back to it, but that would be very brief.
That's beautiful. So without further ado, everyone, this has been our Toolbox Tuesdays on advanced user management as well as auto create dimensions. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to post auto create dimensions as well, just so you have that app source link in there. And then if anyone has any more questions, I know we finished this one off a little bit early. Advanced user management and auto create are both pretty self-explanatory in terms of the immense value that they can add, but just posted that in there. Stick around if you have any questions, and we really appreciate everyone's time. And Carlie, thank you for the presentation.
Yes, thanks everyone.